Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And we are at the beginning of free agency for the 2046 to 2047 offseason. Our Wings are going to be pursuing a 20th consecutive playoff berth in the upcoming season. And we've been playing around with our financials a little bit here. You can see we've ripped our scouting and player development budgets down to quite low levels, certainly not the type of levels that we'd intend to go into next off season with. But YME943 brought up an interesting thought in the comments to our last episode that we wanted to check out. And he suggested that we at least investigate trading for the brilliant young shortstop Steve Buchan of the Montreal Expos. He is brilliant defensively with that 80 range. He's won 3 Gold Gloves, 2-time All-Star, and a 2-time Silver Slugger. Excellent contact, doesn't strike out. He's durable. He's got some speed, popular with the fans. He just finished this past year as a runner-up in the MVP voting to our first baseman, Jim Reichert. And he led the league in at-bats, hits, and batting average, and led the league with a 7.8 WAR. So a brilliant combination of offense and defense, and certainly acquiring a player like him would solve our shortstop problem for many years to come. He is already, however, signed to a pretty intense contract, $27 million this upcoming year, $35.5, and then $46.5 million for 5 consecutive years after that. So I cut our scouting and player development budgets down to the bare bones level just to see what, if anything, we could do to pick him up with the trade when we kind of opened up the money that we would need. And the only guys on our team that we could trade straight up for Buchan, not surprisingly, are Reichert, who just beat him out for the Most Valuable Player award and who is signed to a much friendlier team contract. And also the youngster Arturo Casares, who just won the National League Rookie of the Year award and is also signed to a pretty reasonable contract. So I'd have to give up a huge asset to pick up Buchan, but it would solidify a critical defensive spot with a superior defender who's also a great offensive player for his position. So it's definitely something I thought about, but realistically trading away either Reichert or Casares would just open up another hole on our team. Because you think back to just a couple of seasons ago, 2-3 years ago, when we had this massive wave of brilliant young outfielders / first basemen coming our way. And our major league outfielders back then were Ishmael Velasco, who's still around at center fielder, and then Juan Romero, who we made a trade for and let him leave and go to free agency. Luis Comaduran, who we made a trade for, signed to an extension, and then traded him away ourselves. Tim Boston, who we made a trade for, played a couple years with us, and then we traded him away. And Josh Porter, who is eligible for free agency this year after he declined our qualifying offer and it is hitting the open market. So between the fact that we've needed to layer in another several starters in the outfield as all of those people have left, and we've also traded away some of our more complementary corner outfielders and first basemen in other trades over the last couple of years, we really don't have another big time or even medium time outfielder first base prospect who's really ready to help us next year. So clearly finding a first baseman or say a left fielder is going to be easier than finding a shortstop, but we would be opening another hole on the roster, even though we would be filling the shortstop hole. And given that I still kind of want to see what the likes of Juan Palomo, who hit 300 in his rookie year, despite being a platoon player, or maybe more accurately, thanks to being a platoon player. Still want to see what Josh Fuchs is able to do at the major league level. We know that the bat's not going to be great, but I still like the glove. And looking at his ratings, he's playable against right-handed pitching. Definitely don't want him to face left-handed pitching. And then looking down in AAA, we've still got Jim Weisenbach down there, whose bat, similar to Fuchs, has not really come along the way that we would hope, but he's still a more than competent defensive shortstop. So while it's an interesting idea with the cost of it in terms of the money we'd be paying, as well as the big player that we'd be giving up, I think I'm inclined to potentially go into next season with some combination of Palomo, Fuchs, and Weisenbach as a shortstop and backup shortstop. And we'll keep an eye on the trade market, and more importantly, over the near term, the free agent market. And if any of the expensive shortstops that are out there that we kind of highlighted at the end of our last episode happen to linger on the market for a few months and their prices drop, might be an avenue for us to pursue. But right now, I think I'm inclined to give the youngsters a chance next year. Can always fix it at the trade deadline if it's not working out. And at the end of our last episode, we also talked about perhaps making a move in the free agent market for the brilliant left-hander Nehemiah Vidale, both jackhammer possessor and DLL first base 14. Kind of thought that that was the right path, and that is the path that I intend to follow. You may remember he was looking for 6 years, about $33.5 million a year average, and a player option for that sixth and final season. We have made him an offer that works for us. It's only a 4-year deal. It's $32 million a year for the first 3 years, and then there's a team option for the fourth season at 36 to get the average annual value up to 33. I think that's a pretty reasonable contract if we're able to get him signed for that amount. It does seem like there is a fair amount of competition, according to our mail, or it may actually be the league mail where I saw this when I was in the game yesterday. He's been linked to the Dodgers, and then there's also several other teams that are supposedly looking at him. So it could be a situation where we end up having a little bit of competition to bring Vidale on board. And because of that, I'm not quite ready to trade away the pitchers, Fierro or Lott, that I talked about in the last episode, whose spots would likely be in jeopardy if we bring Vidale on board, and moving away from those guys would also allow us to open up some more money. Yeah, you can see, as I mentioned, the Dodgers are supposedly negotiating with Vidale, and St. Louis, Texas, the Reds, and I'm sure some other teams are interested in him as well. So we'll continue to monitor what goes on with him in the coming weeks, but it's time to get free agency and the offseason going. And Vidale is going to be our primary goal on the free agent market. And if we get him signed, maybe we pick up a shortstop in a few months. But that will probably be about it. And some good initial feedback from Nehemiah Vidale yesterday, or actually a couple days ago at this point. He said that we're in the lead, but there's still plenty of time for that to change. He is not signed with us yet, and I'm sure there is still a lot of interest for him out there. And a big day in Buffalo history today on December 5th. We've lost Josh Porter, received the supplemental first-round pick for losing him. But we also have to give up a third-round draft pick. But that's because we have signed Nehemiah Vidale. The fans excited about that. as we should be. And I think, as I said, although he's an older player and was looking for a 6-year contract, I think we got him at pretty good terms, really just these next 3 years at $32 million a pop, and then a team option for us at $36 million after these upcoming 3 seasons. His ratings are excellent. He's got a 4-pitch arsenal. He's an Iron Man. He is a proven big-time major league pitcher. And the acquisition of Vidale will now force us. I guess technically it's not going to force us because we still have a little bit of money available with scouting and player development budgets that, while materially lower than a year ago, are certainly not at embarrassing levels. But I would like those to be higher, and we probably now have 10 or 11 starting quality pitchers on our team. So we are likely going to look to move on from Jesus Fierro. The other reason I kind of like this Vidale trade, well, one, he's an incredible pitcher. He's not on our 40-man yet, or our major league roster yet. Now he is. But with the fact that we've got Vidale signed for the next 3 years, we know we're going to have Lance back, who we've signed to an extension. Black is still making the major league minimum, so he'll be back a year from now. But if things go south with Alexis Barajas, we do have the team option at $22 million for him next year. So I'm not hoping that the only remaining player who's been a member of all 5 of our World Series championship teams will get ineffective all of a sudden. But if he does, we can move on from that contract after this season, and that will certainly make the $32 million that we'll be potentially spending a year from now on Mr. Vidale more acceptable. But certainly love the looks of the rotation with Lance, Vidale, Black, Barajas, and then Coles, our captain, in the number 5 slot. So, as I mentioned, between Palencia, Fierro, Caper, Toselli, Manelli, Bills, and Chris Lott, there's a lot of guys on this team that could start. There's too many guys to put onto a 26-man roster. And with Fierro being the most expensive of these guys, who is not in the starting rotation, he's a logical player for us to look to move on from. When we checked in on him a week or two ago in Game Time, was not necessarily an incredibly robust market for him in terms of trading. And you can see right now, if we don't keep anything, there's only 2 pretty mediocre veterans making good money who we can get for him. But we'll probably need to get a little creative and may need to even attach a decent prospect, or maybe one of those other pitchers who's not making quite as much money to Fierro to get him off the books. But with the addition of Vidale, it is certainly something that we can afford to do from a quality of our pitching staff perspective. And we made a trade, and it was an expensive one, to get rid of Fierro's contract. Basically, the Dodgers are the only team that had the money available right now to take on his entire contract, with us keeping some of it. Clearly, part of the reason for that is that we are in the early stages of free agency, and teams have offers out to multiple people, which is limiting the amount of financial wherewithal they had to take on his contract. That being said, though, when I took a look broadly around the league, there weren't a ton of teams that had managed their financials particularly well. There's an argument to be made that if I waited a month or two, there would be some team or teams that really didn't sign much of anyone in free agency who might then have the ability to take on his contract, but I didn't ultimately want to take that risk. So in return, we got a very marginal prospect, 24-year-old Dionysus Welter. Don't see him being a big-time player, 24-year-old who's never made it above high A ball. Basically, just they needed to give us something in return, and they gave us a little cash back, but honestly, that was just enough cash to get the Dodgers to zero in terms of their financials, because in addition to us giving up Mr. Fierro and them taking on all of his contract other than the 25% that the Braves retained when they traded him to us, we also had to give up Chris Lott, and we actually had to retain 20% of his contract to let the Dodgers just make this work financially. So Lott has been a solid pitcher for us over the years, and is certainly still, with his profile, a good, solid major league pitcher. But our pitching staff is so good that he spent part of last year in Albany, and he's no longer a member of our rotation. We also had to give up a few relatively useless minor leaguers, Tony Bishop, Derek Price, and Rodolfo Ceja. But ultimately, it was including Lott with Fierro, so we wouldn't have to pick up any Fierro's contract that made this work. Don't see Welter being a big-time player for us, but it was a decision that financially I wanted to make, because you can see that opens up some money. For the time being, we're going to put it into scouting and player development. But if the shortstops or any of the shortstops do linger on the free agent market, that lets us be a player for a proven major league shortstop. And getting those guys off our books also will put us in a position where, as we try to win it all again next year, we will likely have some money available to bring on some talent as we get closer to the trade deadline in the 2047 season. So feels expensive for what we did, but wanted to get that contract of Vidale for the next 4 years off the books, and didn't want to retain any of it ourselves. And as the calendar turns to 2047, we've made it through the Rule 5 draft, didn't sign anybody, and we just lost Damani Essien, our starting shortstop from last year. He ended up getting paid by the Padres $19.8 million a year for 5 years, so that was very close to what he was looking for. We get another supplemental first-round pick because of his departure, which is positive. It'll lighten the blow a bit. We are going to have to eventually put some more money aside, likely, with the fact that we now have 3 first-round picks. We did lose that, I believe it was a 3rd-round pick, for the fact that we brought Mr. Vidale on board, but we're more than willing to take that trade given what we think he's going to do for us over the next few seasons. So still not in a spectacular financial position, but we're going to be heading into international amateur free agency shortly. If I do anything there, I'll let you know. I'm not going in as much depth in the episodes right now as I historically do. As most of you know, OOTP 25 is coming out a week from today. I'm going to play at least 4 more Buffalo Wings seasons before we finish up this playthrough. But once 25 is out, I'm going to be devoting a good chunk of my time to learning the new game, playing around with the new player development lab, and starting to prepare for a new long play in the new version of the game. So in an effort to get more work done over the next week, work being in quotes because it's really just playing a game, probably not going to be going into the crazy detail that I sometimes go into with things like the Rule 5 draft and roster decisions and working out trades and international amateur free agency, perhaps not even as deep on the regular draft next summer. We'll release a little Easter egg right now, though, to those of you who are still watching and or listening. You may have seen the episode I put out a couple weeks ago at this point that I do every year of 10 challenging teams to consider in OOTP 25. And I noted when I put that video out there that one of those 10 teams would be the team that I was playing this upcoming season in OOTP 25. And unlike 2 years ago when I was pretty confident I was going to be playing with the Kansas City Royals, and unlike last year when I was 100% confident I was going to be doing this realistic expansion with the Buffalo Wings, I really haven't made a decision on what I'm going to do in OOTP 25, but I have cut the 10 teams on that list that I was considering down to 5. So in alphabetical order, the 5 teams that are still in consideration for me to be playing in OOTP 25 when I do start my long play, which will probably be a couple of weeks after OOTP 25 is released, just to give them time to work out any kinks, work out any bugs, and get a couple of patches out. But I'm still considering playing the Tampa Bay Rays. Actually, I'm not going in alphabetical order. I'm going in order from AL East to NL West, American League first, National League last. But the Tampa Bay Rays, the Chicago White Sox, the Los Angeles Angels, the Oakland A's, and the Washington Nationals are the 5 teams that I'm still considering that I will end up playing one of them next season, meaning a season that starts just a few weeks from now. So we're going to continue moving on with this off-season. Got a couple of weeks now until international amateur free agency, and once we've simmed ahead to that point, likely we'll let you know what we're thinking and what we're trying to do. But again, probably not the detail that I usually share on these things. And we're going to kind of go a little bit against form here in international amateur free agency. Daniel Machado is the standout of this pool in terms of what his highest end could be. Could be an incredible bat. He's durable. He's listed as a shortstop. He's really probably more of a guy who can play any position in the infield, but can't really play any of them at a particularly high level. Could also be a corner outfielder. But I don't love the low leadership, really don't love the low work ethic. But we're still going to try to bid a little more than the $2.2 million that he's looking for and see if we can bring him on board. We're going to do something similar with a pitcher that we like, Jesus Mercado. He's got incredible upside. Love his personality. 18 years old, and he's almost 19, and he's only throwing in the low 90s. So he's not a perfect prospect. And he's also going to be reliant on a changer or a slider developing to be anything other than a potentially very high-end left-handed reliever. But we're going to throw bids on both of those guys a little bit above what they're looking for, see if maybe we can lock one of them up. And we've got some fallback ideas if things don't work out with these guys. But if we are able to lock up one of them, I think it's worthwhile, even though neither is a truly perfect prospect. And we've moved on to different international amateur free agents. We just signed Julio Aguirre. Like his work ethic, he's a catching prospect, slightly above average catcher ability, slightly below average catcher arm. Think he could down the road be a useful backup catcher. Was not the most expensive player in the world. Cost $1.4 million to sign, so we've still got $3.35 million available to hopefully make a mark with another player, or 2, or 3. And we've got another international amateur free agent signed, Rodolfo Reina. He's listed as a starting pitcher, but he's really a reliever. but he's got good stamina. He's durable, and if that fastball and splitter both develop, I think he could be a pretty high-end right-handed reliever out of the bullpen. Another guy who's a little bit older, almost 19 years old, and only throwing in the low to mid-90s. So not a perfect prospect, but also not a guy who cost a ton of money for us. We got him signed for $1.25 million. So we've still got a decent amount of money to scatter around to some middling to lower-end prospects. The high-end prospects are all either gone or looking for far more money than we have to spend now, and in many cases, more money than we had to spend at the beginning of the IAFA period. And we ended up signing one more player, third baseman David Morel, out of the Dominican. Pretty average kind of prospect. Going to have some talent change randomness for him to work out for us. But he's only 17 years old, has some positive personality traits, has a gun of an arm. Probably not going to be a big-time player for us in the future, but you miss all the shots you don't take, and he's one more shot for us. And we've made it to spring training. We've got 22 pitchers in camp, going to be going with our customary 6-man starting rotation. Also have 28 position players in camp, although only 49 players overall because Reagan Bursey, who we traded back for this past offseason, is a two-way player. I don't think there's a ton of spots up for grabs, trying to get as much people playing time as possible during this spring training period here in 2047. Taking a look at the free agents who are out there. The shortstops, there's not really much. Steve Anderson was a shortstop back in the day when he was on our team. Still has a useful-ish major league bat, although he hit just $180 in the final stop last year with Arizona after hitting .233 with Minnesota. Competent defensively at a lot of positions, but I think we'd go with youth over him. Eric Barger is a second baseman, got a better bat, not quite as good defensively, and some negative personality traits. So there's no one who really jumps off the page to me as someone who's going to be an absolute difference maker. Alexis Rivera, good personality, some speed. He's durable, decent bat. But I don't think we're going to chase after any of these guys. I think if one of them happens to be on the market a month from now when spring training is done and they're willing to sign a minor league contract, we'd certainly consider bringing them on board. Our old buddy Juan Romero is still a free agent as well. Old buddy Bobby Bolig, also a free agent at the age of 39. He's been in our minor league system quite often in recent years. Taking a look at the top-end pitchers that are available, Jeremy Grimes is by far the best profile in terms of his ratings and his potential ratings, but he is wrecked physically, and he's also out for most of the season, if not all of the season, with a torn elbow ligament. He'd be a guy that I'd certainly be happy to take a flyer on. If he was willing to sign a minor league contract and then rehab with us all year, maybe he could be helpful towards the end of the year. But with the depth we have at pitching, no need to chase. And again, we may end up looking to actually lay off a little bit of salary at some point. Don't know whether it would be right at the end of spring training when we're making our decisions on the 26-man roster or during the season, because we're negative money now, but that's just because we have so many people up on our 26-man roster. And as I talked about earlier, we're ultimately going to prefer to set a little bit more money aside to sign the 3 first-round picks we're going to be having in the draft in a few months. And our final free agent from last year has signed with another team. Mike Whitehead, a longtime utility infielder for us, was actually a starter for good chunks of his career, a guy who came up in our system, signed with the Cardinals for $2.4 million. The fans don't like that, but we still have over 100 fan interest at this point. So don't want to say no harm, no foul, but wish Whitehead luck in his new digs. And we've simmed about a week and a half into spring training and just suffered a important injury. Certainly not great. Starting center fielder Ishmael Velasco going to be out for 8 weeks with a fractured wrist. So he'll miss the first month plus of the season. He has been an excellent player for us over time. Rookie of the Year, multiple-time All-Star, and he is a 3-time World Series MVP at the age of 29. A very productive offensive player. He can hit a lot of doubles. He's led the league in triples before, hits 15 to 20 homers a year, steals 25, 30 bases a year, 119 career WRC plus for us, and he's also a good, solid defensive center fielder. So his absence the first month of the season will let the youngster Casares be an everyday center fielder. We'll see whether or not Velasco will be able to get the job back. Casares did win a Gold Glove in left field last year when he was also winning Rookie of the Year. Weren't going to move Velasco aside given what he's accomplished, but now Casares is going to, now that he's a second-year player, going to get an opportunity to go out there and maybe show us why he should keep that position when Velasco's back, which will probably be sometime in early to mid-May if everything goes well. And as we get to the end of spring training, we are going to make another trade to clear up a little bit of payroll for us and also clear up the fact that we've got too many good major league pitchers. And we are going to trade away Simeon Manelli, a versatile player who can start and relieve. We signed him to a long-term extension, and he's making $3 to $4 million a year for the next 6 or 7 years. He does have options left, so we could send him down to AAA, but I would rather get the payroll off the books of $3 million for a guy who's really just organizational depth for us at this point, given that our pitching is so good. So we're going to get some cash in return to improve the financial situation even more. And we're also going to get second baseman Yonardi Langley. He's 25 years old. He's a player that does have 2 option years left, making the minimum this year. He's going to be making over $2 million next year, most likely. With the fact that we still kind of have a utility infielder position that's up for grabs, and with the injury to Mr. Velasco, we've still got a spot or two on the 26-man roster that is up for debate right now as we're trying to finalize the team. I think it's conceivable Langley could be kind of a second utility infielder for us, and also a guy who can play in the outfield, although he hasn't been well trained there while he's been with the Seattle and Colorado organizations. Not a great hitter, but not a total disaster, and a guy who can play a lot of positions. 2 options left, as I said, and we'll also get some cash back in return, and we'll get a little bit of payroll relief, which will help set us up better for the 3 first-round picks that we have this year, and also ensure that hopefully we'll have a little bit of money available to bring on some contracts as we get closer to the trade deadline, since we're certainly still in win-now mode. And we've made our decisions on the 26-man roster, and with the trade that we just made, we have a little bit of money to spend during this coming season, which should be helpful given that we are in win-now mode. Scouting and player development budgets both down, not massively, but certainly materially from where they've been the last few years. We're going to be running 17 million in scouting, 33 million in player development this year. The big reason for that is, of course, the addition of Nehemiah Vidale, who will be our number 2 starter behind Jim Lance. Danny Black, who finished 4th in the Rookie of the Year voting and 3rd in the Cy Young Award voting last year, will be our 3 starter. Former Cy Young winner and the best pitcher in franchise history for the Buffalo Wings, the 38-year-old Alexis Barajas, will be our 4th starter. And Jim Coles will be 5th. McClintock back as our closer, Auclair as our stopper, and then in the bullpen we've got a ton of talent outside of those 2 guys who are also extremely talented. 3 righties and 3 lefties. The righties, Palencia, and then the youngsters, Caper and Bills, make the team, and then the lefties, Aguirre, Kashuk, and Taselli. Really like this pitching staff. We've definitely made some trades this offseason to dampen our organizational depth a bit, but still really like the 13 players who are going to be on our major league team, and we definitely have some guys who could help in AAA, although to be fair, they're a bit less proven now than maybe the guys that we had in AAA a year ago. And we've also decided on the 13 players that are going to come north with us. Catchers, Steve Banks and Juan Ramirez. And we are actually going to be starting Steve Banks against right-handed pitchers, Ramirez against left-handed pitchers. Ramirez has been our starter for the last few years, but has not put a stranglehold on that position with the way that he's hit. We think that Banks' bat has a little more upside than Ramirez, and although Banks doesn't have quite a good arm, he's just as good as him in terms of his catcher ability. So we're going to see what Banks can do. Reichert is our first baseman. Medina is our second baseman. Ferguson is our third baseman. We're going to go with the platoon of Fuchs and Palomo at shortstop. And then Yanardi Langley, who we just talked about, is going to make the team as a utility player. And then Kevin Griffith, who we picked up in a trade with the Yankees in the offseason, liked that captain personality. He's actually going to make the team also, and he's actually going to be in the starting lineup against left-handed pitchers. We've got so many infielders because we are down an outfielder with the injury to Velasco. So we're going to go with the 4 that you would expect: Aguayo, Leal, Habersham, Casares, and Toledo. And the thought is if we need another outfielder at some point, we could send down a Griffith or a Langley or potentially even a Fuchs. But right now, we're going to be a little deeper in the infield than we are in the outfield as we get ready to begin this 2047 season. And we've made it to opening day, especially with the injury to Velasco. A couple of surprises as far as the major league roster. So there could be some tweaking that we'll need to do as far as our utility players and backups off the bench. But really excited about our pitching. Really excited to see how some of these young hitters play in their second full years in the majors. Or in the case of Toledo and Aguayo Leal, their first full years in the majors. No pressure. Ownership expects us to win it all. Taking a look at the preseason predictions here, the Tigers and the Mariners expected to be the 2 best teams in the American League. And over in the National League, should be tighter for us than last year, but we're still expected to be the only 100-win team in baseball. Expected to go 102-60. Reichert and Casares, the dynamic duo, both expected to have monster years for us again. And at least in this simulation, the outfielder Jamari Habersham expected to have a big year for us, hitting .322 with 51 steals. Pitching-wise, not surprisingly, Vidale expected to be awesome, 19-5 with a .245 ERA in the simulation that they ran. We would certainly sign up for that in a second. So feeling good about this team and our opportunity to hopefully make a 20th consecutive playoff appearance here in 2047, and hopefully, when all is said and done, win a 6th World Series title. And we'll find out how we start in our progress towards that goal in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.